Hello and welcome to the Car and Car monthly web chat today. I am very excited to introduce one of our newest attorneys that we've added to the firm here, Ryan Childress. And one of the things that we are very excited about and we want to let the world know is that we are going to be expanding our practice areas, and we are going to be doing Social Security disability work. Everyone's getting older. None of us are getting out of here alive, so it's going to be an issue, not necessarily the retirement, but it's the disability part of that. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Wilson White. I am the head attorney in the claims department here. Been practicing in Oklahoma for 29 years. I'd like to turn it over and introduce to you Ryan Childress. Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself?
Okay, thank you, Wilson. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Childress. I came to Oklahoma in 2009 for law school and really enjoyed it, and so I decided to stay. Since my time here, I've practiced in a couple of different areas. I've been a Social Security disability lawyer. I've also handled plaintiff's personal injury cases, and I've done some insurance defense work. My passion for Social Security comes from a fight my family had. I have an aunt who is very dear to me who had a very unnecessarily difficult battle with the Social Security Administration trying to get benefits. So for me, it kind of hits close to home when I think about a disability case. And so that's the reason why I decided I wanted to do this full time. My spare time, I really enjoy CrossFit and tennis. So if you don't find me in the office, you'll probably see me on a tennis court somewhere.
Great. Well, I appreciate that background. Why don't you, Ryan, give us kind of just kind of give us an oversight or an overview of the process of approval of Social Security disability, and you might even start and just give us the basic difference between Social Security retirement and Social Security disability.
Sure. So Social Security retirement is something that most folks get at the age of 65 or older, and that's because you've paid into the system for so long that Social Security supplemental income kicks in. Disability is a medical issue where the Social Security Administration finds through objective medical evidence that you're no longer able to work any job that exists, not just one in your market, but any one that's out there. And as the claimant, the burden is on you to show that through your medical records and treatment. The process can take a bit of time depending on the case criteria, your age, and a number of different factors, but generally there are 5 potential stages to any Social Security disability case. The first one is the initial application. That's something that we can't do for you as your attorney. You have to file that yourself, and you can do it one of 3 ways. You can do it over the phone, online, or you can do it at your local Social Security office. Only 20% of first-time applicants are approved at the initial stage. It's incredibly difficult to get approved the first time at the initial stage, or even at subsequent stages. After that, we move into what's called the request for reconsideration stage. This is the first appeal in the appeals process where a second round of folks will take a look at your file. Not a whole lot of folks are approved here. The third stage, which is the most popular stage for approval, is called the hearing stage. This is where you and me would go to the Office of Disability Adjudication and Review. That's where the hearing office is. And we would sit before an administrative law judge and present our case to the court. This is really the opportunity for the client to tell the court, the reasons why the client can't work. And in my opinion, is one of the most important parts of the Social Security process. If we unfortunately are unsuccessful there, then we move into what's called the Appeals Council stage. The Appeals Council is an internal appellate body established by the Social Security Administration. What they do is they took a look at the hearing transcript and the medical records and see if there's any errors of law that were committed. If the Appeals Council denies your claim, we have one last opportunity to appeal, and that's at the federal district court level.
Now, Ryan, since so many people don't get initially approved, has to be pretty catastrophic for those people. How long does it take from when you file your application to the hearing?
Usually, and it depends a lot on the various factors of your case, but I would say on average you could get a hearing within 12 to 14 months from the date you file your initial. That's assuming you get all your paperwork in on time, you get the medical records from the providers quickly, but I think that's pretty average, somewhere around a year to get a hearing.
Okay, so it is kind of a long process, and it's fairly tedious. You would agree?
Yes, sir, very much so. Social Security is very, very interested in knowing every part about your medical history. They want to know what you do on a daily basis, the kind of jobs you've had in the past, your education level. It's a very involved process.
Okay. Generally, on the overview, is there more than one type of a disability program?
Yes, sir, there is. And a lot of folks don't know that, but there are actually two. When we say Social Security disability, that broadly refers to two programs. And they're found in Titles 2 and 16 of the Social Security Act. You're talking about Title 2, which is Social Security Disability Insurance Benefits, and the Title 16, which is called Social Security Supplemental Income, or SSI for short. Title 2 is a program that you and I as workers, we pay into. Any working person pays into what's called FICA, which you can see on your pay stub, and that insures you, for lack of a better term, for Title 2 benefits. If you're not working, or if you're more of a needs-based situation, like you're a single person, you don't have a spouse, that's where Title 16 kicks in, and that's a need-based program. It is possible to be eligible for both. Some folks are, but a lot of folks usually aren't.
Also on the SSI, what I have found is you can have some really good, hardworking people that work 20 or 30 years, but if they're kind of more on a cash basis, they can get into a problem if they get disabled because they have not been paying into the system.
Yes, sir, that's correct. To qualify for SSI, or excuse me, for Title 2, you have to have been paying in for what they call 20 of the past 40 economic quarters, or 5 of the past 10 years. So that's where you kind of run into that problem, is that even if a person works his or her entire life, but they don't satisfy that time cap, they can lose access to that program.
So that is an important factor. If people, hardworking people, if you're an independent contractor, 1099s, or if you have businesses, cash businesses, landscaping, yard work, construction, different things like that, I have found over time that it's really tough to tell somebody who's been really hurt bad in a car wreck or something like that, that they don't qualify for the SSD. And what I find, Ryan, and you might speak about this, is the income different levels of what you can get on SSD disability versus SSI. Why don't you address that?
Sure. And so in looking at both of those programs, you're talking about two different types of benefits, but we're also looking at a very different situation when it comes to SSI. So like a lot of folks, for example, they may have worked their, I've talked to people who have worked their entire life and they've paid into SSD enough, but let's say they passed the time cap on that, and then their spouse is working and making good money, so they medically are disabled, but they don't meet the requirements for the program. So you run into that sometimes. Sometimes though, folks do, for lack of a better term, they just get lucky. They're in the right time cap for SSD. They are in a needs-based program under SSI, and they can get some good compensation out of that. The compensation they get just varies so much because it really depends on the unique factors of the case, coupled with how long you've been disabled and how much back pay you're entitled to.
Right. But usually SSD, you get quite a bit more monthly as opposed to SSI.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And sometimes it can be $1,800, $1,900 on the cap of SSD, and it might be $600 or $800 on SSI.
That's been my experience. Yeah.
Okay. And that's also an important factor if you're trying to utilize that, for living expenses and everything like that. How do the attorneys get paid?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and it's actually controlled by federal law. It's not something that we can, as a firm, set up a policy to handle. That's a federal law. It says this is what you're going to get paid. And the way it works is we get 25% of your back pay, or a maximum of $6,000, whichever amount happens to be less. And there's one exception to that, and that's if you file a federal appeal in federal district court and you're successful, then that $6,000 cap is lifted. In my experience doing these, we've maybe filed 15 to 20 federal appeals, maybe won 5 of them. So it's really rare because you have to have a winning case that loses at every proper stage. And usually in my experience, and it's good for the clients, this doesn't happen very much because we want to get them approved as soon as possible. So we want them to, the good thing is different folks at different stages are looking at their case, so it's much more likely that they'll get approved at the different levels.
Okay. We've got a question that's popped up here. Why don't you read that, and we'll see what you can answer, Ryan.
Sure. This is from Mr. Dan Ruskowski. I hope I said that right. If I get SS disability before my normal retirement age, will it decrease my normal SS retirement income at my normal retirement age? Dan, in my experience, the answer to that question is no, because we're talking about two different things. What we are discussing is Social Security disability, which is a person's medical inability to work. The program you're referring to is the Social Security system you've been paying into your entire life that was established by the Social Security Act. So getting benefits before doesn't mean you're necessarily, or that you're automatically going to get less money when you retire.
And I think if I'm correct, if you were on disability, let's say from ages 55 to 65, then at 65, does it transfer back over to the retirement, or do you stay on the Social Security disability?
My understanding is it transfers back over to the retirement. And the good thing about getting on SSD or SSI is that folks usually become eligible for Medicare at that point, which is good because usually you have to wait till 65 to get on Medicare. If you get on Social Security, a lot of folks don't have private health insurance at that point, so it allows them to get better quality medical treatment.
Okay. Ryan, you also might address, which I have found the big question is, it's my understanding, and please correct me because you're the expert, is on Social Security disability to qualify, one of the basics, maybe it's a little broad, is that you have to either have been off work for a year or you are going to be off work for up to a year because of a disability, cancer, you fell 25 feet and broke every bone in your body. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, well, first, I would use the term expert in me very loosely.
Okay.
But no, I'm only kidding. Yes, and that I think leads us to a good time to discuss the 5-step process that Social Security uses to approve someone. And the first question they ask is, are you working? And Wilson's correct. You have to show that you're not working, or that you're not working to what they call the substantial gainful activity level, which means 40 hours a week. Some folks can work part-time and still get on Social Security, but the caveat I always tell clients is that Social Security can pluck and review your case at any time and terminate your benefits. So if you're working 25, 30 hours a week, you're going to pop up on their radar a lot more than if you're working 10 or 15. But yes, generally, the requirement is that you have to have some type of medical condition that's going to say you can't perform any job that's out there. And that's step 1 of the 5-step analysis. If you'd like, I can go on with the remaining step. Yeah. And step 2 is, do you have medical conditions that make it difficult for you to work, or in our case, impossible for you to work? And most folks can point to any number of things in their body and say, yeah, that's the reason why I can't work. Well, that quickly gets us to step 3, which is the first opportunity a person has to get approved for disability benefits, which the question is, do you meet or equal what they call a listing? Now, a listing is a broad medical index Social Security has created to say that if you have this specific medical condition, we automatically find you disabled. So for example, there's one about cardiac ejection fractions in your heart, where if you have less than 20% of a primary valve, Social Security will consider you disabled, right? So those are the types of very serious medical conditions that Social Security says, you know what, we're not going to consider your work history, you're disabled. Moving into step 4, they start looking at your work history. And step 4 says, can you return to the jobs you had in the past? Some folks can, and if that's the case, Social Security says you're not disabled. A lot of folks, though, they'll come from, say, like a construction background or something that's very heavy manual labor. Maybe they had a car wreck or work injury and they can't do those very heavy jobs anymore. So the 5th and final step, which is where most people get approved or denied, is, can you do any job that's out there? And in Social Security world, your job doesn't even have, or the job they're referring to doesn't even have to exist in your market. It's just got to exist, period. And so the burden is on us to collect your medical records and advocate for you and say, no, you can't do any of those jobs out there because of whatever medical conditions you have.
So it's really, it's medical conditions drive the situation.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay. Now also, Ryan, I have found, kind of as a generality again, the older you are, the better chance you have to get Social Security disability. The younger you are, the harder it is.
Yes, sir, that's absolutely true. And the reason, if I may,
sure.
the reason behind that is Social Security has established a series of rules that if you start looking these things up online, they call them the grid rules. The grids look at your age, your education, and your relevant work history at the 5 different exertional levels to determine whether or not you're disabled. And the idea behind this is, in Social Security's eyes, they think, well, for lack of a better term, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right.
And so their opinion is the quote unquote old dog starts around age 50.
Okay.
And they say at that point, it's really hard to start training someone on a new career, giving them brand new tasks and new skills. So that's why if you're under 50, you've got a little bit more of an uphill climb than say someone who's over 50.
Right. So you're calling me old, or an old dog, for sure. Well, and the other thing too, Ryan, and at my age, I'm 58. What I have found too that I think also factors in for a lot of these people is, there's just kind of a bias sometimes, an age bias, and you're out, and if you're in your 50s and you're competing with people in their 30s, sometimes some companies, they just want to go younger. So not only is it harder to retrain some of the people, especially the people that have had heavy manual labor, but it's just that's just kind of those human nature factors that you could get into. And I think that they hopefully take that into consideration with that. So getting back on the attorney fee situation. So basically what that means is if we are unsuccessful and don't win the appeals, clients don't owe us anything, do they?
That's correct. Yeah, we're purely contingent, so there's no upfront fees. The way we start your claims process is you call me. I have an intake form that I do. It takes about 5-10 minutes. I just ask you some basic questions about your work history, your medical conditions, and then assuming we take your case, if possible, we like to have folks come in, but we understand transportation, gas prices, those kinds of things. So we'll send you the paperwork we need. The only thing we need you to do is just fill out that initial application, because again, Social Security won't let us do that.
Right, and I think in the old days, there was a little more flexibility to do that, but it was my understanding that Social Security really got away from the attorneys filling out everything because they just kind of were too more cookie cutter or standard.
Right.
They wanted to be very specific to that individual person.
That's correct.
Situation there and everything like that. So any other points that you wanted to make today about Social Security disability or anything?
The only thing that really comes to mind that I get asked a lot is what's called an alleged onset date. This is, or AOD for short. And Social Security around the state is very important. And Social Security will ask